Good morning if you're in the West Coast, and good afternoon if you're farther east. This is Margaret Aumann with the California Wic Association, welcoming you to the Wic Works webinar. Today's topic is the Wic food package changes for nutrition advocates. And I have with me today Lori True from the California Wic Association and Ann Cording from the California State Wic Program to talk about this topic. I'm going to do a few introductory slides and get us going with some logistics, but we're glad that you joined us today. Today, our learning objectives are to identify where you can get information about the Wic food package final rule, which was recently released. And you'll be able to describe at least 2 changes in the milk and dairy provisions of the Wic food package, as well as at least 2 changes in the cash value voucher for fruits and vegetables provided by Wic. There are many other changes that Ann will describe, and Lori then will look at some of the challenges and opportunities related to the Wic food package policies, both associated with the final rule as well as in the future. So just a couple notes about using Gotowebinar. Hopefully you figured out that you can listen through your computer speakers if your computer has them, or you can listen via telephone. And your confirmation email would have had phone number and access code, and once you enter that, you'll get a PIN to log in. If you have any trouble, you can go to Gotowebinar, or you can ask a question in the question box or the chat box on your control panel on the right. Just a little note that if you're connected by telephone, please don't put your line on hold. Everybody is in listen-only mode so that your phone is already muted, so you don't need to put your line on hold with the potential for disrupting the webinar. So thanks for that. And how we'll be handling questions today is you type it into the question box. We have over 140 people participating, so having you ask your question locally, live, is rather cumbersome. So we'll have you type it into the question box, and then we'll prioritize and screen those questions and forward them to the panelists throughout the presentation. We'll take questions for Ann Cording's presentation right after her presentation. And then at the end, we'll have a discussion and questions regarding Lori's presentation. This webinar is being recorded, and it'll be available on our website in a couple days. If you're new to our webinars and are not familiar with California Wic Association, we just wanted to let you know that we are a nonprofit member organization representing local California Wic agency directors and a variety of supporters. And if you're new to Wic, you should know that it's the special supplemental nutrition program for women, infants, and children. We provide training and staff development, public education, legislative advocacy, research and policy analysis, and a lot more to promote the Wic program and make sure it's still serving women and children as it should. So we'd love for you to be a partner, and you can look into becoming a member on our website. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Lori. She's going to introduce Ann Cording.
Hi, everyone. It's very nice to see such a big crowd of listeners, eager listeners. We just wanted to give everyone an update on the final rule that came out in March, because there were some very exciting additional changes that were made in the final rule that are going to make the Wic program even better. So with us to go over the changes in all their glory is Ann Cording, who's a public health nutrition specialist, a food package specialist over at the California Department of Public Health Wic Division in Sacramento. And she is the appointed expert over there with nutrition skills, working on these very exciting changes, and we're so happy to have her here. And we're ready to go.
Great. Thank you very much, Lori. I appreciate the very, very nice introduction. Thank you so much. Welcome, everybody. We're going to discuss some of the changes in the Wic food package that came out with the final rule earlier this year. It was published on March 4th, And I have included a link there if you want to take a look at the full final rule, because within this particular presentation, I didn't include any technical corrections or policy amendments or clarifications. They're all very technical and probably not of much interest to the folks who are going to be on this particular webinar. So I wanted to give you a moment to write that web address down if you wanted it, so that you could go forward from there and take a look at it yourself. We do always recommend that if you're going to be fairly involved in food package changes as we go forward. All right, so there are several changes, excuse me, that have been made with the final rule that California actually already is in compliance with, so we do not need to make these changes. One of the changes is that states must allow organic fruits and vegetables to be purchased with the cash value voucher. Now, shorthand for that is CVV. I wanted to let you know early on that you're going to see CVV a lot during this presentation. So basically what that is that fruit and vegetable food instrument, that fruit and vegetable check. California already allows organic, so we do not need to make that change. Split tender transactions must be allowed with the CVV. What that means is the participant must be allowed to pay over the amount on the check if their full purchase of fruit and vegetables is higher than that amount. California already does that, so we do not need to implement that. States may no longer allow cheese to be issued beyond the maximum, even with the prescription. California never did that, so we don't need to make that change. And then California already issues fresh bananas for infants, so we do not need to make that change as well. It's kind of nice that we have a handful of things that other states are going to need to look at, but we don't. All right, so let's launch into the actual changes. The first change that is actually just happened, it was implemented 2 days ago at this point, is the child's CVV, fruit and vegetable check, has been increased from $6 to $8. This was a required change. All states were required to do this, and we were required to implement it by June 2nd. And California has implemented it, and we are already rolling on it. One of the second changes that are coming up is that USDA will no longer require a prescription for a child to receive soy and tofu. Now, prior to this, we had to get a prescription from the physician. USDA felt it was necessary for the doctor to follow a child who was consuming soy or tofu, whether it was medical need or lifestyle choice. But now they've determined that the competent professional authority, and I'll go into that a little bit more on the next slide, has the expertise to make that decision. They can do the analysis, do the assessment, and make that determination at the local agency level. Now, for states that do issue soy and tofu, and California does issue soy and tofu, it is a required change, and it needs to be implemented by October 1st, 2014. Additionally with this, within the regulations, there are fairly extensive directions from USDA to make sure that participants are aware of potential nutritional differences between consuming soy and tofu versus consuming milk and cheese. And from California's perspective, we're already launching education and staff training so that we are equipped to inform our participants of the differences between soy products and the cow's milk-based products so they can make an informed decision when choosing those products. What is a CPA? Well, it's a competent professional authority and is defined in the Code of Federal Regulations and includes the following persons: a physician, a nutritionist, a dietitian, registered nurse, physician's assistants, and any state or locally medically trained health official. These individuals may make the determinations that a CPA is allowed to make within both the interim and the final rule. Along with this, there have been some changes in medical documentation. Up until now, almost all medical documentation was in the hands of the participant's physician. However, between the American Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, and USDA, state WIC agencies, local WIC agencies, all coming together and trying to explain that nutritionists and dietitians at the local level definitely have the expertise to make some of these determinations. So supplemental foods in food package 3 are foods that are for medical needs. So participants who have a medical need are considered part of package 3. And up until now, the participant's healthcare provider needed to be the person to determine which foods. So for example, if a participant has an allergy, the physician was the one who needed to determine which foods could be provided. Now, the local WIC registered dietitian or nutritionist may identify those appropriate in foods and amounts based on that individual nutrition assessment. So let's say of a participant who comes in with an allergy, the local agency RD or nutritionist can now determine, oh, this participant may not have milk, or this participant may not have soy because they have a soy allergy. Now, this may be done in conjunction with the physician's, with participant's physician as necessary. And I do want to point out that this excludes formula, whether it be contract formula or exempt formula, therapeutic formulas. That is still in the hands of the physician. As USDA feels it's very important for any medically delicate participant to be followed by a physician closely. This is an optional change. We can still keep everything in the hands of the physician if we choose to do so. And implementation date for this change is no earlier than October 1st, 2014. Dried fruits for children. Up until this point, dried fruit has not been allowed for children between the dental concerns and choking hazard concerns. But with all the research that has come out, the IOM and USDA reviewed this and determined that with appropriate education, dry fruit is a safe and good option for children on the WIC program. California has offered dried fruits to women since July of 2011, so this is a great move forward. And as we all know, California is a big dried fruit state, so there's a lot of positives to go along with this change. So now, dried fruits may be purchased with the child's CVV, fruit and vegetable check. This is an optional change, and the implementation date is on or after October 1st, 2014. There are several changes regarding milk. One change is the ability to provide fat-reduced milk to 1-year-old children. Currently, children 12 to 23 months, 1 to 2 years old, receive whole milk. They all receive whole milk. There is no difference on that one. Now, children 1 to 2 years old will still receive whole milk unless there are several medical issues that need to be addressed. States are allowed to issue fat-reduced milks to children 1 to 2 years old for whom overweight or obesity is a concern through a nutritional assessment by the CPA. Now, fat-reduced milks include 2%, 1%, and skim. This is an optional change, and it may be implemented on or after October 1st, 2014. Another change coming to milk is that low-fat 1% and non-fat milk for women and children older than 2 years old will become the standard option. Right now, women and children in California, children over 2 years old, are given the option of choosing 2% milk, 1% milk, or skim milk. Starting October 1st, the standard milks will be 1% milk and non-fat milk for women and children over 2 years old. This is a required change, and we must implement it by October 1st of this year. Our implementation date is going to be September 29th, 2014, to coincide with our computer systems change cycle. Yogurt. I'm sure everyone's been hearing about yogurt because we've been getting a lot of questions on it. Up until now, yogurt has not been allowed. The change is a quart of yogurt per month may be authorized in place of 1 quart of milk for women and children in packages 3 through 7. Many of you may or may not know that there was a yogurt pilot that was performed. I'm sorry, I don't know the exact year that we did it, but I believe it was around 2009. The yogurt pilot study that was done in California to determine how viable the option would be. The study found that it was quite popular among participants, and this was taken into consideration by USDA when they were looking into adding yogurt to the program. The changes for yogurt include substituting yogurt for a quart of milk. Participants can receive 1 quart per month. Any authorized yogurts have to meet the standard of identity for yogurt. And of course, this SOI is the FDA SOI. So it's 21 CFR 131.2, 131.203, and 131.206. Authorized yogurts may be plain or flavored. Authorized yogurts may contain no more than 40 grams of sugar per 1 cup of yogurt. For women and children over 2 years old, only low-fat and non-fat milk yogurts are authorized. For children under 24 months, whole-fat yogurt is authorized. Yogurts with any mixed-in ingredients are not allowed. Drinkable yogurt is not allowed. And state agencies may determine the container size up to a quart that we may authorize per month. The dangling quart has been a hot topic because cost containment has been such a hot topic in all the states. I think USDA got bombarded with, can we drop the dangling quart? The dangling quart comes about for food packages that include cheese. When you're dividing that half gallon of milk, the cheese takes up 1 quart, so you're left over with a quart of milk. Right now, California issues a quart of milk in those affected food packages. While we cannot ignore the dangling quart, USDA has provided several options that we can use to deal with the dangling quart. One is to just keep it, allow that quart of milk. Another option is the quart of yogurt that we just discussed. And the third option is we can provide 1 12-ounce can of evaporated milk in place of the dangling quart. Another option we could do is to prescribe 1/2 gallon of milk every other month, so it will tally over. Implementation date for this change, if we choose to make any of these changes, is on or after October 1st, 2014. Whole wheat macaroni pasta is now included in the food package on a federal level. It has not been allowed up until this point. Now, state agencies may choose to include whole wheat pasta, macaroni as a whole grain option. The federal rule uses the term macaroni, but it really does pretty much include any form of, any shape of pasta that falls under the whole wheat descriptions. It is an optional change, and implementation is on or after October 1st of 2014. Jack mackerel is also being added as an option for the canned fish category in addition to tuna, sardines, and salmon. Currently, California offers tuna, sardines, and salmon, and we will be looking into whether we want to include jack mackerel as a 4th option. It is an optional change, and implementation date is on or after October 1st, 2014. Another change through the fruit and vegetable checks, the CVV, is including a CVV for infants. Currently, it is not allowed. All infants up to 1 year old received jarred baby food. Now, for infants 9 to 11 months, partially breastfed and fully formula-fed infants have the ability to receive a $4 fruit and vegetable check plus 64 ounces of infant fruits and vegetables, and a fully breastfed infant may receive an $8 fruit and vegetable CVV plus 128 ounces of infant fruits and vegetables. If states choose to make this change, we must provide participants the option of receiving the fruit and vegetable check plus infant fruits and vegetables, or all infant fruits and vegetables in jars. So we have to provide them with the choice of getting the fruit and vegetable check or getting just all infant fruits and vegetables in jars. This is an optional change, and implementation date is on or after October 1st, 2014. Infant fruits and vegetables in lieu of a fruit and vegetable check is being allowed by USDA now, reflecting several states' needs to provide pureed foods to women and children over a year old who have a medical need, based on perhaps an inborn error for swallowing, a defect in the throat or in the mouth, something to that effect. So now, Any woman or child less than 12 months old in food package 3, again, this is the medical food package, may receive infant fruits and vegetables in lieu of that CVV. For children, they can receive 128 ounces of infant fruits and vegetables in lieu of their $8 CVV. And for women, it will be 160 ounces of infant fruits and vegetables in lieu of the $10 CVV. This is an optional change, and the implementation date is on or after October 1st of this year. So it provides you with a bit of a timeline review. The presentation was set up in chronological order, so you saw what was coming first, moving on to the optional changes, which we have later dates to implement them by. First and foremost, the increase in the child fruits and vegetable check to $8 has been accomplished. We're already rolling on this one. On October 1st of this year, we need to remove the 2% milk as a standard for women's and children's packages. They will only be able to receive 1% milk or skim milk. And then also the prescription will no longer be required for children to receive soy and tofu. And again, the actual implementation date for both of these will be September 29th rather than October 1st. Additional deadlines, October 1st of this year, any optional changes may be implemented on or after this date. That's when we can really get rolling on this guy. The only strange change is yogurt. They're not allowing yogurt to be implemented before April 1st of next year. So more than likely, to make as clean of a change in the entire food package, is any changes we make, we'll make in line with the yogurt change, so it'll be a little bit later in the year. All right. Thank you for your attention. I have included my email address at the top of this slide if you would be interested in contacting me directly with any questions. But I think if we can take some questions right now, that would be great.
Great. Thanks so much, Anne. It's really clear and thorough presentation. We do have a few questions. One is, are you guys, is how it was phrased, but so you can answer who is going to do it, going to educate participants with the new changes, and what about grocery stores?
Yes, our focus up until this point has been that milk change, going from 2% to 1% in skim. We do know that 2% milk is extremely popular amongst WIC participants, and anticipated that this would be maybe a little bit of a rocky change, so we focused the bulk of our efforts on creating education materials and training for this shift that's going to take place on September 29th. We're getting to the end of that planning stage, so now we're going to be able to start moving forward to discuss the optional changes and what may or may not be coming. Some of these changes are going to require a cost-benefit analysis from us, from state staff, that we need to forward to our management to determine whether it's in the best interest of the program. So we probably won't be announcing yes or no, are we going to do something until we have that approval.
Great. And another question is about whether California is adopting the optional changes regarding infants, such as fully breastfed versus partially breastfed.
I think that I hope I'm thinking of what they're asking. There's a technical, I'm not really sure what they're alluding to in that. There is a technical clarification in the final rule regarding what a mostly breastfed infant is categorized as. Whoever asked that question, can you clarify your question a little bit so I can be more certain exactly what you're asking?
Okay, we'll see if she can do that. We have quite a few questions about yogurt, as you might imagine.
Yeah.
So ranging from whether California has determined the sizes and flavors, how is it piloted, specific to size and flavors, and will California be reviewing the entire food list outside of these new final rule changes, is one question.
Okay. Well, let me, before we get too many more, let me answer these so I don't forget anything that just came through.
Right.
As far as yogurt goes, no, we have not determined yet sizes, nor have we determined flavor or sugar level or any of those things, because we have not taken a close look at any of the optional changes yet. Again, we're focused on the milk change, the soy change, and the CVV increase. And now that we're wired down pretty tight on those September 29th changes, we can start going more in depth into the optional changes. And yogurt will definitely be one that we're taking a really close look at. Details on the pilot, I was not directly involved in the pilot. Dr. Pat Gradziel here at the State WIC offices was. I am pretty sure the pilot was actually published. And I can't remember if it was in the American Journal of Dietetics, but I think that's where it was. I can find out, and I can forward that information on to Margaret and Lori if anybody wants to get that from them. Somebody asked if we would be reviewing the entire food list at the time. That's a very good question. We're a little bit early in the process to be able to answer that fully, but I can tell you implementing final rule changes is almost certainly going to necessitate a lawful WIC authorized food list shopping guide revision, because that just to clarify changes, and there will be information that is different with optional change implementation than is in the current one. So we will be taking a look globally at the food list from that perspective, certainly.
And for those of you who are not in California, just a clarification, going forward for the last couple of years, we are using this, the state of California uses grocer alerts and essentially publishes a regulatory proposal. There's a comment period, review and comment for public input, and then the final food package changes is published. That's correct, Anne?
Yes, that is correct.
There will be opportunity for public input.
Yes, absolutely. Any change like this to the food list is required to go through this regulatory process, and there's a public comment period, as well as a stakeholder work group by webinar. And information is put up on the California WIC website. I believe the title is WIC Regulations, and there's almost always something new, so there's a little exclamation point by it, so it's fairly easy to find. And anybody who's interested in what's going on with the food, I would keep, a speed dial onto that link, because I'm sure we'll be putting stuff up.
Great. We're still looking for clarification, Eunice Lee, about what are you talking about when you say, will California offer the benefits for infants? Are you talking about the definition of breastfeeding? Are you talking about the baby food CVV? It's unclear what you're trying to look for. Here's a question that's easy to answer. How will these various changes affect the financial picture? As we add more dollars, is there any area of savings?
That's a really good question. Yeah, cost containment is definitely something we take seriously here at the state. The only change that is absolutely a cost increase is the increase of the child's CVV from $6 to $8. That increase was made on a federal level. So USDA took that into consideration, and I'm sure it will affect every state's food grant, to make sure that that's covered. As far as each individual change, that's why we do a cost-benefit analysis. So we can take a look at each change individually. Is this a cost-neutral change? Will it add a dollar amount? If so, is there a way to make this change to make it cost-neutral? So on and so forth. So doing the analysis for each of the optional changes it's fairly intensive. We look at a lot of different things: cost, participant preference, is it available throughout the state, things like that.
Great. Yeah, it's a very important part of policy decision making in the WIC program. Thank you, Anne.
You're welcome.
The question is, any update on the product submittal process for authorization approval of brand-specific items, i.e. infant cereals, etc.?
Not at this point. We don't have a set timeline for that. Again, whether or not we look at it, it's likely we'll look at it when we're ready to revise the WIC Authorized Food List Shopping Guide, since we'll need to make those changes for any final rule changes. Any affected manufacturers, I can promise you that we will notify you with plenty of time if we are asking for submissions for those products so we can take a look at them.
Here's one. We will be looking at the whole grain content of cereals given the language in the final rule strongly encouraging only whole grain options to the final rule although the final rule doesn't require it.
Yes, California actually does take a pretty close look at whole grain as it is. We did a cereal review, I think it was 3 years ago at this point, and whole grain was one of the biggest factors. We tried to bulk up our list so we're offering more than the 51% required amount of whole grain cereals over the whole list. So that is something we will look at, but we do have other criteria we need to look at, participant acceptance, cost, so on and so forth. So yeah, we'll be taking a look at whether or not we can beef up the number of whole grain cereals on our list.
Thank you, Ann. Here's one, just a clarification. For infants, is the rule $4 plus 64 ounces of infant foods or $4 in lieu of 64 ounces of baby food?
$4 plus 64 ounces of infant foods. So
Right.
the children, or excuse me, the infants who choose to receive infant fruit and vegetable check will get both jarred infant fruits and vegetables and the check for fresh, frozen, or canned.
Great. Somebody asked, can we get a copy? Yes, the slides will be posted probably by Friday or Monday of this week. Question about Jack Mackerel. What's the diff between Jack and King Mackerel? Are they both high in mercury?
King Mackerel is higher.
Okay.
Jack Mackerel is considered to be within safe limits for a pregnant breastfeeding woman.
Okay, here's a question about sodium consumption. You did not mention the topic regarding lowering the amount of sodium consumed by WIC participants and states having the option to require low sodium, no salt added canned foods. Is this something on the California WIC program's radar?
It is on our radar. I would like to point out that we actually allow various levels of sodium on our program. So we allow the quote-unquote regular, we allow low sodium, so on and so forth. California has for a long time been a program of choice. We tried to provide as much choice as possible to participants. It's something we will consider as we're reviewing options, but again, this is an optional change. And since we already keep that fairly wide open to participant choice, a better direction for us to take might be, rather than changing the foods and directing them all to be low sodium, is to provide more education on reducing your sodium intake.
Great, thank you, Ann. We have just one other question, and that's about the milk options. Just to clarify, will 2% not be authorized for any age group?
That's a very good question. For all standard packages, which means packages that most women and children receive, they will not be able to get 2% milk. They will only be able to get 1% and skim milk. There isn't, the optional change to provide reduced fat milk to overweight or obese 1 to 2 year olds. There is the potential for that group to get 2%. However, the decision has not been made yet here at the state level as to whether or not we're going to implement that optional change. So potentially 2% milk might be received by one group, but I can't answer yes or no to that question just yet.
Great, that's very helpful. Thank you.
And one general question. So it sounds to me like you have a lot on your plate to implement these required changes by the deadlines, and I'm hearing you to say that a lot of the optional decision making will probably take place over the next 6 months in preparation for the possible yogurt change in April, so that you would make the next sort of batch of changes all at the same time?
Yes, that's actually a perfect synopsis.
Yeah. So we did get some questions about what, will the state do this, will the state do that? All of these are options that the state needs to research, and that's what's exciting about WIC. We have many policy options to think about and to advocate about. So for those of you who are listening, you feel strongly about things, this is your opportunity to work with us. We'll keep you posted, and when the time comes to weigh in, either via stakeholder group or public comments, we will certainly engage you to do so, because this is where nutrition advocacy can play a very important role in improving the nutrition of millions of families.
Absolutely.
Okay, there's just a couple other questions coming in, but I think that we need to move forward. And so if you have a specific question, Ann Cording's contact information or email is here on this final slide right here, and these slides will be posted on our website by Friday, along with a recording of this presentation. So we're going to move on. I did want to mention, however, something I meant to say at the beginning of the webinar, and that is we are offering one CPEU for registered dietitians, continuing education unit, with this webinar. And we're new to this process, and given the restrictions or the requirements as a provider of this continuing education by the Commission on Dietetic Registration, we can only provide that CPEU to RDs who register for the live webinar, attend it live, and attend the full hour. So we hope that a number of you are able to take advantage of that, and if you have any questions, you can email us at CWA. Right now I'm going to pass this back to Lori True, our Executive Director here at CWA, and she's going to talk about some of the policy challenges and opportunities.
Hi everyone. While Margaret changes the slides, I just want to point out that we did get some questions about, are you going to educate the participants about the changes? Oh yes, we are. The WIC program is heavily invested in high-quality, learner-centered nutrition education, and a great deal of thought and strategic coordination is involved in any change, big and small, in the package. And right now, the state and local agencies are busy preparing for the milk change, which is definitely going to be somewhat of a challenge. So I'm just going to go over some of those challenges and opportunities, both within the package changes and beyond, so that you can have something to think about and hopefully engage with us as we move forward. Just some information on the rule itself. Here's another. There's lots of ways to find the rule. Here's another way to get it than the one Ann suggested, but it is, for those of you who are WIC policy wonks, it is fun to read the actual regulations, and there they are. CWA has also prepared a very brief 4-page summary of the final rule, and you can find that on the link displayed here. Our current most critical and serious challenge in the WIC program doesn't have to do with the final rule directly. It has to do with a very discouraging and disturbing trend, which we've seen in the last couple of years. We're a very small but vocal part of the food industry in this country has taken exception to the decision by USDA to exclude white potatoes from the fresh, frozen, and canned fruits and vegetables CVV that Ann mentioned in the both the interim and the final rule published in March. The reason USDA made that decision was based on the scientific review and recommendations from the Institute of Medicine, which up until now has driven the entire decision-making process of the WIC food package. And the opinion of the Institute of Medicine panel that was commissioned to review the food packages over several years of very hard work was that white potatoes were not a strategically needed vegetable or starch by our population. It was very commonly consumed and low cost, and therefore was not a targeted nutrient or fresh or frozen or canned vegetable that was needed by our population. This decision and the implementation of the rule in 2009 made the potato industry very unhappy, and they have spent many thousands of dollars and many years lobbying members of Congress to reverse this exclusion. They have made several attempts in appropriations bills. They've been rebuffed by USDA's final rule, which continued to exclude them. However, in recent months, the appropriations process has been the latest vehicle for this lobbying effort, and I'm unhappy to report that the lobby successfully lobbied the House Agriculture Appropriations Committee to mandate the inclusion of white potatoes. So that bill was marked up and is going to the floor with a mandatory re-inclusion or inclusion of white potatoes in the WIC food packages. On the Senate side, there's also a mandated inclusion of white potatoes. There's some glimmer of hope because it also requires USDA to include the review of white potato issue in the revision of the food package scientific review that's ongoing. And if the committee opines again that white potatoes are not a necessary and targeted vegetable, they can re-exclude it. But that seems somewhat unlikely. So here we have it. We have two ag appropriations markups that both essentially mandate the inclusion of white potatoes. Now, this doesn't really have that much to do with white potatoes, good, bad, or indifferent. It has to do with the first time that in the history of the program that a lobby has successfully allowed, Congress has actually allowed an aggressive lobby to intrude into what has heretofore been science-based policy. So to reiterate, it really doesn't have that much to do with white potatoes. It's what's troubling is the precedent. So if we cannot find a way out of this conundrum, I really hate to say it, but I think we're going to see more of the food industry wanting to get their items into the food package and using the same lobbying tactics. It was very disheartening to see members of Congress back down on this despite being urged by the First Lady and many of you not to go there. So the only possible way out of it now is that we don't get the ag appropriations bills actually passed on the floor, conferenced, and sent to the President for signature, that we somehow end up with an omnibus spending bill that would essentially revert us back to current law. But at this point, they're headed to their respective floors, and unless that train stops, it's looking like a very troubling policy precedent will now be endangering, in my view, the entire WIC food package. So we're going to have to be extra vigilant and never say die. We could try to fix this later, but it's quite troubling. Another challenge that many of us in the nutrition world are a bit concerned about is that the final rule allows for the yogurt rule, which is a state option, allows added sugar up to 40 grams per cup. And as those of you know who are in the sugar-sweetened beverage advocacy world, 40 grams of sugar is about 10 teaspoons, and that's a lot of sugar. So let us just say here and now that CWA and our members are quite concerned that despite the fact that there are requirements for low-fat yogurts to be on the WIC food package, that low fat would be essentially canceled out by so much sugar that it's going to be fattening anyway. So we're not going to be we're going to work on that. We hope that the states do not take that option of, very sugary yogurts, because that would cancel out the benefits. As Ann mentioned, many of our participants have told us for years that they prefer the milks with higher fat content. And nutrition education was very critical as we rolled out the food package in 2009 about educating the participants just to get them from whole milk to 2% was a challenge. And now it's by 2%. So this is going to be a real challenge, but experience has shown that with coordinated and positive messaging and taste testing, it is possible to change behavior when you have the combination of quality nutrition education, upbeat and culturally competent promotions, and plenty of taste testing. It does, the WIC food packages do change both behaviors and purchasing patterns. And so I would just like to issue a challenge and a call to action to all of our partners to help the WIC, State WIC Division as they come up with their nutrition education materials and work with both their nutrition educators on the ground and their local vendor liaisons who work with the grocery stores, that all of us can help with this. All grocers should be considering point-of-sale taste testings. Once participants taste the difference between 1% and skim, or 2% and 1%, they're delighted. They realize that there isn't, these, particularly in California, our skim and 1% milks are very tasty, and they're not watery, and they're obviously just as healthy. That's another misconception that participants have. They think they're less healthy because they're not whole. So point-of-sale taste testings all over the place. All those of you who are working on sugar-sweetened beverage campaigns and water and Rethink Your Drink, don't forget to help us promote 1% and skim milk. Dairy Council and Project Lean, you remember the 1% milk campaigns that were done years and years ago before we even had the change in the food package? Let's dust those off and use them again. We need to get the message out. Healthcare providers and child care providers and our first 5 partners, we can all work together because one of the things we've learned with WIC is when you promote a change in purchasing and consuming, it's a lifelong habit that you can change. So we look forward to working with all of our partners to promote this very healthy change. Because believe me, this is a major change. That's a lot of fat that's going to be coming out of the environment. And we're very excited about it, but it's got to be strategic to work. Another opportunity that Ann didn't mention that's sort of technical but really exciting to us, those of us who really love farmers markets and want to work with California's thousands of family farmers, is that the CVV fruit and vegetable checks are now, there's a state option that we hope California takes that will allow the state to authorize markets instead of farmers to do the to transact the CVV cash value vouchers for fruits and vegetables at farmers markets. There's 2 different programs, the fruit and vegetable checks and the WIC farmers market checks. Those are 2 separate sets of checks, but the fruit and vegetable checks are much larger in denomination and you get them every month. So it's a huge new market for farmers markets and small farmers, but they have to be able to be authorized and learn how to transact the checks in a whole different way. And it's a hassle. But even with the hassle that it is currently, with each farmer having to be separately authorized as a vendor, it's worth it for some farmers, and we have a handful of farmers who are actually doing this already. Now, if the state takes the option, the market manager could do the paperwork and just give tokens to the shoppers. It'd be much, much easier, and we could really increase the market for farmers for these very valuable fruit and vegetable checks. So we're really looking forward to trying to make that happen in the next year or so. It's a very exciting new option. The fruit and vegetable substitution for baby foods is another really great option. Participants have been telling us for years that they want this option, and our policy brief that you can read online, the link is there, shows that the redemption goes way down for the older infants because parents just don't use the baby food. The infants are getting into mashed up things and homemade things, and they don't like the baby food. So we're hoping that we can make that work too, because it's a very badly needed change, and we're looking forward to making that. Looking ahead, because of the potato controversy, but also because of its time, USDA has already started the wheels turning on another decennial or 10-year comprehensive review of the WIC food package from top to bottom by a newly commissioned panel of the Institute of Medicine. So hopefully that will get started in 2015, and there will be public input opportunities for all advocates and stakeholders. It will be an opportunity to look at some of the parts of the food package that that science needs updating on, etc. And CWA is going to be tracking that process very closely and engaging all of you in advocacy where needed. The WIC program is due to be reauthorized. Some say next year. It may be put off. And given the troubling precedent in the potato industry, there will probably be lobbying from various parts of the food and farm industry to include or exclude new adventures in the food package changes. So we're going to have to really work hard as advocates to protect not only the nutritional integrity of the package, but the process and try to make it as science-based as possible and not allow the program to essentially be sold down the river and essentially really would be damaging to the integrity of our program. So stay tuned for lots of action in the next couple of years.
Great. Thank you, Lori. There are obviously a lot of issues to be addressed. We're going to go back to some questions, and specifically for Lori and any others that came through.
With the increase to the CVV, will there be an adjustment to the amount of juice? No, juice hasn't been touched at all in this final rule, but I would note that that issue is something that we as advocates at CWA are very interested in exploring. With the increased information coming to us about sugar-sweetened beverages and some questioning the real lack of difference between juice and sugar-sweetened beverages, I think there is an opportunity to take a look at whether even more fresh fruits and vegetables could be substituted for some of the juice. So that's a good question.
There's another question about yogurt. Maybe you could address, Anne. Will the USDA allow yogurt with added artificial sweeteners?
Yes, they do allow artificial sweeteners in yogurt. California's policy has been up to this point no added artificial sweeteners, so that would be something that when we review yogurt we would need to take a look at.
Okay, great. Somebody mentions here for our information that the most successful nutrition education on choosing lower fat milk used cute character cups for lower fat and plain white cups for higher fat milk. So that's an interesting point. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, it just shows that sometimes the environmental behavior issues are more important than the actual taste.
Yeah, packaging.
Yeah.
So,
anything else?
We don't see any other questions now, so please submit your questions in the question box if you have any. We just have a few more minutes left in our hour. There was an interesting point made about the idea of going from 2% milk down to 1% milk. Somebody mentioned a study published in the Archives of Disease in Childhood in 2013 that looked at it was a longitudinal evaluation of milk type consumed and weight status in preschoolers. So we don't know if the USDA considered that. That looks quite recent. Perhaps it'll come through in the next IOM review process if it hasn't been considered already.
One more question. I'm not sure if this is from a Californian. We're planning to educate participants starting in July regarding the milk. Will we know about the 2% for 1 to 2-year-olds by then? Anne?
Yeah, I'm on. I was just thinking for a second.
Yeah,
that's it. Again, I can't say yes or no on that. Right now, we're not planning on making that change on September 29th along with the other change. It's been a surprisingly difficult topic. So right now we're digging into a lot of data and research to see what our best option would be. I can tell you from meeting with the internal work group here at the state and our Food Policy Review Committee, which includes both state and local staff, that we're pretty much torn kind of down the middle on this topic. So that's why we're trying to dig into more of the data and see if we can get some more hard evidence so we can come up with a little bit more solid place to stand, bring it back to the review committee and say, hey, here's some more data, what do you think? Go on with that.
Yeah. Yeah, for those of you who are less familiar with the process, California WIC and USDA, there's a lot of issues that need to be balanced when you make a decision about what goes in the package, what doesn't. It's a matter of cost, benefit, science, what the most recent literature says, and appeal to the participants. You can have the healthiest food possible, but if the participants don't like it, you're not going to get them into the office to get the rest of the beneficial WIC services. So it's a very delicate and tight balance, and in my experience, the state of California expert team does a really good job in balancing all those different considerations. So we really look forward to an exciting year, and we will have more webinars later this summer about the concurrent and related changes to the grocery system in California, and we look forward to hearing more from the State Division about that. But with that, I'd like to thank Ann again for being so helpful and expert on her review, and all of you for being with us. And we look forward to seeing you again on our next series of webinars. Thanks for being on.
Anything to add?
Thank you very much for having me.
Great. We're so glad that you were able to share today, Ann, and thanks for joining us. Just a reminder that
I appreciate the opportunity.
Great. The recording and the PowerPoint presentations will be posted on our website by the end of the week. So look for those and for future webinars on that same page at calwic.org. Thanks so much for joining us, everyone.